Big game this week, Cakes, for the Commanders against the Eagles. And I know I needed a little refresher. I know we played them great whenever that was in week 4.
Week 4, yep.
But I wanted to go back and look at it and remind myself. See,
How it went. Yeah.
We're in our early 50s. Our brains are all just mush.
Yeah. I had to go back and look at the play-by-play.
Yeah, I looked
at
the
play-by-play. They had a 17-7 lead.
Yeah, 17-7 lead. Remember, they had a 17-10 lead, I think it was, at halftime. And then it just got kind of ugly, if I remember correctly. There were a lot of punts, right, in the fourth quarter. Ended up going into overtime. They were in that weird spot where, they just needed to get something going, and they couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if this play sheet is corrected, 1, 2, 3, 3 straight drives, or 3 out of 4 drives where they punted.
Well, also what happened was A.J. Brown erupted on them in the second half.
That was the Emmanuel Forbes game.
They had difficulty with him. But they did their part, too. I mean, they scored 31. It was 31-31. I mean, A.J. Brown got his, but we also did pretty darn well, too.
Remember, in the second half of that game, Sam Howell led 2 drives, one to tie it at 24 and one to tie it at 31.
Right down the stretch, which was a huge one.
Yeah.
It was their best offensive game, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Sam Howell was 29 of 41 for 290. Only 1 touchdown, but that was to Dotson, right? Remember, that was to Dotson at the end.
And he also chipped in, I believe he had 40 rushing yards in that game, something around there.
McLaurin had 8 catches for 86. He was targeted 10 times in that game. Remember, Dotson and McLaurin were targeted 19 times in that game.
Yep.
And they did a pretty decent job against DeAndre Swift and Gainwell and those guys. They did, as a team, rush for 104 yards, but only 3.9 yards per carry. A lot of that was Jalen Hurts, who had 34 yards on the ground. So they did a decent job there. Hurts had a big day. He was 25 of 37.
I think we give out decent too readily. They gave up 34 points. They gave up 415 yards, and that's been a problem this year that none of us expected. Their defense currently ranked 29th in points, 29th in yardage.
Well, in that game, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith were targeted 22 times. They had 16 catches for 253 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Hurts is going to do the exact same thing. And, I can't remember how many yards Swift had in that game. He had 56 yards rushing for a touchdown. But
he wasn't super effective.
He wasn't. It was all A.J. Brown.
Yeah, it was A.J. Brown and also Devontae.
And Devontae.
Their passing game hurt us. I'm trying to think. Did we have any sacks that day? I'm just looking at. We had 3 sacks.
Yes.
Right. Curl had a sack. Chase had a sack, and John Allen had a sack. So you're going to need at least that, to be honest with you.
The Eagles helped them out in that game too. They were penalized 11 times.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wasn't an A game at all by the Eagles. They still put up 400 yards of offense. They still put up 34 yards.
The Eagles sputtered in the red zone too because they had to settle for 4 field goals. Still wound up scoring 34 points. Now, part of that's because it went to overtime, but it's a hard team to slow down.
So they basically, they have benched their first-round draft pick, right? Emmanuel Forbes. It appears he hasn't played in the last 2 weeks. If you look at the box, there's no mention of him. Sometimes these guys could sneak on a field. You might not notice
I think he played 7% of the snaps last week.
So he must have been on special teams or something, huh? Was it a team?
I didn't notice him.
He plays teams.
Trust me, he was very unnoticeable last week.
Do you think they're obviously not going to put him on A.J. Brown this week?
I wouldn't think so.
Do you think not having him there, maybe having a more veteran guy, even if it's just like a St. Just or somebody? St. Just is the one that makes sense to me because he's a little bigger, more physical, and I questioned that at the time.
But he was getting killed by Hyatt last week.
But he also had 4 passes defense.
I think
he made some plays too.
I think with the streak that A.J. Brown is on right now, I just don't know if anybody for any team is going to really slow him down. I think you have to double him throughout the game. You have to give safety help. You have to give some sort of help.
I agree, but if you do that, don't you think they can do better than they did the first time?
Maybe, but that's just going to open up everything in the middle for Goddard and for Devontae.
And the last few games, they've given up some pretty good production to tight ends, and Goddard didn't do much in the first game. So I would expect him to have at least a little bit of a bigger role in game 2.
You mentioned the streak. It is incredible to look at it. It started in week 3, 131 yards receiving. And then 175, then 127, then 131, then 137. He's on a roll.
Yeah, he's a super stud, alpha, unquestioned number 1 target for Jalen Hurts. And if Devontae Smith gets out of his funk that he's been in the last couple of weeks, that's just another guy who the Commanders have historically had trouble containing.
Think about the numbers that both A.J. Brown and Tyreek Hill are on pace for. They're 1 and 2 in receiving in the NFL. Hill's got 902 receiving yards, and Brown's got 809 through 7 games.
Right.
So you put 10 more games out there if they stay healthy, and they're going to put up, 1,800 yards.
Now, they weren't
crazy.
able to do this in the first game, but Jalen Hurts has been throwing some picks this year. So maybe your defense can force a couple turnovers. They didn't do it in game 1. I don't think it's necessarily likely, but that's what the Commanders need to do. And to me, the defensive line, although we have some statistics, Chase Young is, top 5 in pressures, and Montez Sweat has 5.5 sacks. Chase isn't that far behind him. They aren't consistently creating havoc to then force turnovers.
No, absolutely. I think they're going to have to bring extra guys. They're going to have to be a little dicier than what Jack likes to do, right? He's a pretty conservative guy. We'll see. I mean, the good news is, as good as Philadelphia is, and I do believe that they're an excellent football team, we all know that Jalen Hurts hasn't had the kind of MVP-type year he has had in years past, right? His touchdown-interception ratio is not impressive. He's got almost as many interceptions through 7 or 8 games than he had all of last year, right? He's very close to that number. They just lost to the Jets a couple weeks ago in Zach Wilson. So, I don't know.
They should have won that game. They made an awful decision to throw on 3rd and 8 when they could have run the ball. The Jets didn't have any timeouts, and they could have punted, made Zach Wilson go the length of the field with a lead, and they decided not to.
Here's the question.
So he throws.
Will the Commanders employ the meet the press defensive technique, which has been espoused by Matt Valdez, and try and leg press the brotherly shove or tush push
I'm going to guess probably not.
If they were smart, they would at least try it, but I'm guessing you're not going to see that on Sunday at FedEx.
Now, Drabby keeps bringing up this this bet that he's seen that has become sort of in vogue, and I could see it happening. J.P. Finley put this out there. This is from one of the websites that the Commanders move Jacoby Brissett to quarterback. That likelihood has increased as the sack numbers have not decreased for Sam Howell. And this is the bet is, will Jacoby Brissett start a game with injuries not included? Okay, so take injury out. Will Sam Howell essentially be benched for Jacoby Brissett to start a game this year? It's minus 200.
So if Jacoby comes in at halftime, that doesn't qualify.
Likely
it has
to
to
happen.
start the game.
Yeah.
Likely to happen.
I would probably make the wager. Certainly if there was injuries involved, I would definitely make the wager, but it would be higher odds. But I think that, like we were talking during the break, Ron's feeling the heat on this. And he's been talking about it every week, about the sack numbers and how they're increasing. And, if Brissett was in there, I would assume he's not going to take the sacks that Howell would. So I think it's going to happen.
There's a little bit of a pattern with Sam Howell. In even number games, and this is week 8, he doesn't throw picks. Odd number games, he throws picks. So in week 1, week 3, week 5, week 7, he's throwing interceptions. So, EB, due theory should be even number game. It's week 8. Should be no interceptions from Sam Howell.
Well, I do think there is something to be said. One of the qualities of Sam Howell that I like is his resiliency, that he will throw a pick or have a bad fumble or, take a bad sack or something, and then we've seen him repeatedly bounce back. He's not able to do it consistently every game. He's a young player. He has flaws. But I do think he is resilient, and he does learn from his mistakes. He hasn't been able to completely get away from the sack bugaboo thing, but there are a lot of factors involved in that. I actually think he'll play okay.
How are they looking on injuries? Cody Barton's not going to play.
I don't think Cody Barton's going to play.
So that means David Mayo probably starts there?
Probably David Mayo, and then Kalike Hudson will get some playing time. He's had an increased role the last couple weeks. And then along the offensive line, there could just be a benching, right? Tyler Larson is the one that everybody's talking about.
And is Charles going to go? Is Sadiq Charles going to go?
I don't know.
If he doesn't, I guess Stromberg does start for him.
Although I heard speculation that they can move Gates to guard.
Okay.
They could move Gates to guard,
especially if Charles is sidelined or if he's limited. That could be the case.
You wonder. I mean, I don't know. I don't know the techniques. And
would any of you guys bet that this is the week where the streak of 5 sacks is broken? So it started in the Bills game, where Denver only had 4 sacks on Sam Howell, but then the Bills had 9.
4 sacks. I like how you frame it that way.
The Eagles, the Bears, and the Falcons all had 5. The Giants had 6. Mm-hmm. Would you bet under 5?
I'm not interested in betting it.
Can't take it.
But I wouldn't be shocked because they should be scheming around this. This is their whole focus.
You can scheme around it as much as you want, but if you have way more talented players on defense than the guys you're trotting out on that offensive line, they're going to find a way to your quarterback. Especially if he holds it too long.
He could throw it away.
Junkies poll of the day is up, brought to you by Van Meter Homes. Who wins on Sunday, Commanders or Eagles? You can vote at Junks Radio. Couple minutes in, 88% are going Eagles. So 12% still believe the Commanders can pull this off.